So now I'm going to teach you guys how to use a slicer software. A slicer pretty much does as it sounds. It takes a 3D object and it slices it into layers that the 3D printer can read. So a 3D printer pretty much adds on material layer by layer, and a slicer uh, converts your 3D model into a code that your printer can understand. So for FDM printing, the kind of printing that uses filaments, the more traditional kind, you want to get a FDM specific slicer, and a really good one and widely used one is Cura. So you can just search Cura on Google and you can see the first thing that comes up. It's actually by the company Ultimaker, which they make they're one of the biggest 3D printing brands out there. So you can download the software here and go through the default installing process. I've already downloaded the software, so I'm gonna open it up here. It'll just take it a second. Once you're in this program, since I've already opened it, it might look a little different, but the first time you start up the program, you'll be this window will pop up for you, pretty much asking you to add your printer, because each printer is different from each other in its size and nozzle and everything alike. So you want to go here, add a non-network printer, and this software pretty much has probably 99% of printers that are out on the market already pre-coded into here as default settings. So if you want to use the library printers at UVic, they use a Ultimaker 3. So you could just choose that and go with the settings. Or if you have a printer that you can't find here, you could also always make your own. So you can go to custom and add the printer, and say my printer is a little bit bigger than this. The size of the printer will, for mine, is quite a bit bigger, and you can see in real time it changes in the background, and you don't really want to touch anything else. And over here, um, it's your nozzle size, and you can have different nozzle sizes, and if you want to switch them in and out, you could change this setting. But for now, we're just going to use the default library printer. And there's a very good chance that if you get a printer, it's going to show up here. And once you add that, it'll preload everything. It'll even show you what the printer kind of looks like, where the back of the printer is, and everything. To actually modify the settings of your print, you want to go on this tab on the top right side over here and press this, and it'll show you its recommended kind of printing settings. There are two very important things here. The profile, so this is each individual layer height, so these are in millimeters, so this is 0.1 millimeter. And so the smaller it is, the more accurate and nicer your print is going to look, but at the same time it's just going to take a longer amount of time because the material is going to be extruded at a smaller degree. And the infill is how full you want your object to be. You rarely ever print an object in 3D printing that's completely filled up with plastic. You usually uh, want it to be empty inside just to conserve on plastic, and it's really not necessary for it to be filled in that much. And another thing I'll take your attention to is supports, and support pretty much gives additional structural features that will support the print where there are overhangs to make sure it can print. I'll show you these more in depth, and it'll be easier to look at. But if you want to have a little bit more control, you can go to custom, and there are all of these things, and you can add more sections to play around with. And just over time, there are many different ways you can modify it. Say like you wanna like exactly how thick you want each wall to be, or what kind of a infill pattern you want, or what temperature your material has to be melted at. And this is actually pretty important, and usually find this information on the filaments package or wherever you're at getting your things printed. They will tell you that all of these specifications for their material. So I want to bring in two of the objects we made, one the cube with the holes in it and the other one the stencil. So I could either go through File and open things up, or I can just drag things in here. So this is our cube that we made that has holes in it. And one thing you can notice is this cube has overhangs, and Cura highlights the overhangs with a red part. This is a little bit of a problem because the plastic is kind of floating over here, and if you print this without supports, it could run into trouble. So what you want to do is go over here, and you could just go into the default settings and click the support. And once you slice it, it'll take it a second, and it'll tell you estimated time. But what you want to do is press preview. And when you press preview, it's kind of a different image. You can kind of see that our cube now has pieces of plastic applied to the areas with the overhang. So what this does, it kind of holds this top part in place while it's printing, but it's going to be printed in a way that it's going to be easy for you to snap it out once it's finished. And one cool thing you can do is use the scroll wheel here and see exactly layer by layer how this print is going to be done. So I can move this down and you can see what I mean by infill. So this object is not completely full of plastic. There is a certain layer pattern to it, and that's how it's going to be filled up. Now say I want a different kind of infill or a different kind of infill density. So the infill density pretty much dictates how much of your material is going to be full. So if I bring this all the way to 100, the entire thing is going to be a solid block. So I'll show you here. So if we drag the cursor down, you can see the entire thing is just solid. And those are just the supports in the middle. But the entire thing is solid. But we can bring this all the way down to say 10% and slice it once more. And now you can see there's a big gap inside. Obviously, if you want something more structurally stable, you want a higher infill density, and maybe you even want to play around with different kinds of infill patterns, but usually lower infills will do just fine. Now I'm gonna import the stencil that we made. So I'm just gonna close this up and drag it into here. And sometimes it does this, it like views it as a clear piece, but that's not a problem. So the difference between this and the last object is there are no overhangs. This is a perfectly flat piece of plastic, and you don't have to worry about adding supports to it. So we can just go over here and take away supports and slice it normally. And you can see here your print is all sliced up. And this thin layer of plastic that you see around here on the base of the print is called a skirt, and what it does, it pretty much helps your print stick to the printer while it's printing, and it could easily be taken off later on. And you could play with the settings of this in the custom settings as well. And if you go through the layers, you can kind of see that the first couple of bottom layers are filled to make a solid wall, but then once it gets to the middle, you can see the infill coming in to make it a hollow shape. Once it gets to the top, a solid layer will come on again to make this whole thing a solid shape. So one thing you want to take note of is are pieces that aren't joined to the main board. So say this middle part of the O, this middle part of the R, and this middle part of the A. So these pieces aren't actually touching any of this. So once it's printed, obviously you can see here, they're not going to be one piece. So you could account for that by going to Tinkercad and just adding a little piece of plastic that joins these two parts together. Once you're happy with everything, you press Save to File, and the saving interface will come up, and you can notice here that it's going to save it in G code. And G code is pretty much the code that your printer is going to understand and print with. So once you save this file, you drag the file into a USB stick or any other kind of memory that your printer reads, and you can print right away, and it'll use all the settings that you've chosen.